You're listening to Fulfilling Career, Happy Life, the podcast for accomplished professionals who want to identify what's next in their career and make it happen without compromising what matters most. I'm your host, Randi Roberts, an executive and career life coach, and I'm glad you're here. If you want to feel more energized about your work again, this show is for you. So let's get into it. Thought a lot about growth this week, obviously, and one of the quotes that came to mind, and it was actually another coach that said this to me: growing up and growing old are inevitable, but growth is a choice. And I really like that because it felt like it was in our control what we want to do with, taking things on, and what we want to do with making something of ourselves and growing in very purposeful ways. And the importance of growth is really personal. Like, you have to know yourself. You have to know what's important to you. How much do you need it? But most of the people that I've worked with, people certainly in my coaching circle, because they seek it out, are very growth oriented. And we kind of operate on this premise of grow or wither. So it's really important. It's the air that we breathe. And it's really worth thinking about what you need. For a lot of people, the opposite of growth is boredom. I think that's true for myself. And so it's really important to know what you need and pay attention to those signs so that you can dial it up when it is what you need. But you have to know that growth only happens in a big way if you're willing to step out there and get uncomfortable. It's kind of the price you pay for growth in many cases. So just, embrace it, take it on. I remember there was a time back when I was in the corporate world and I was leading a big team, and I was actually concerned that I was playing it too safe. I had hit my big goal and I didn't feel that I was growing and stretching myself enough, and I was playing it too safe. So what I did was, I thought a lot about it. I put on my calendar every day, what did you do to get uncomfortable today? To remind myself to push my edge and sort of push myself to grow. For me, those little signs and things that I put around are really meaningful, and it actually made a difference and encouraged me to get out there a little bit more. So it's good for you to know what it is for you if you feel maybe that you need a bit of a push in that area. I had a client, I was talking to a client the other day, a fairly new client, and we often start with doing a values assessment to dig into what's important to her in that case. And she was talking a lot about the importance of growth, but, personal versus professional growth, and where is that line? And really, it got me thinking about, why is there even really a distinction? Why is it so important? Not to say it isn't all the time, but it just goes to a philosophy that I hold, which is, it's not about your work and your life. It's all your life. So something that may be driving growth for you in one area will have payoffs in another area. So one example, and this is an area that I was trying to grow last year, was to have a mindfulness practice. And to me, that was a personal growth thing. I wanted to be able to stay more in the moment and focus more on one thing, that kind of thing. But what I found was, it had payoff for me in my personal life, but it also had big payoff in your professional life, because I found myself to be more focused, more discerning about what the things were worthy of my attention and what I could let go of or delegate. And so that's just one example of something that I thought of as a personal growth experience, but it really had payoffs everywhere. So I'm kind of curious what your own experience has been with that, and what your feeling is on the thought of personal versus professional growth. I'm not sure I see the importance in a difference, at least today. So the important thing, again, is to ask yourself, to dig into your values and see what is important to you in terms of your need for growth. Think about what your ideal situation is, where you are now, what the gaps are. And then you can sort of figure out what it is you need. Which areas do you need to be growing? And a good test often is how you feel when you think about it. that can help you figure out what you need. If you're thinking about stretching in a professional way, like, does that energize you? Does it get you excited? Or, maybe it even feels a little scary sometimes. But fear can even be energy if it's within balance. And so I find in a lot of ways, paying attention to your reaction to things can tell you what you need and what you really want. So what's the payoff for growth? The payoff is, there's a world of possibilities. It's hard to limit them, because by growing, you can go in any different direction. It's true that your career dreams may come true. And maybe you'll even go beyond what you dreamed of. I've worked with a number of clients that are actually in positions of responsibility or different areas that is more than they ever thought they would achieve. And it's really interesting because that brings its own challenges of kind of growing into that role. And that's been really fulfilling work, to see people step into shoes that are kind of too big and figure out a way to grow into them. The rewards are tremendous. So it's almost a willingness and just a desire to step out there, get uncomfortable, as I said, and grow into the situation. But what's the risk? Everything's got a payoff. It's got a risk or it's got a downside. So the risk in growing, you may end up somewhere you don't want to be. You may decide that the work wasn't worth it. That's something you can only know if you go through it. And there's also a risk of failure, but you have to be willing to fail in order to grow. Otherwise, you play safe. And, playing it safe has its time. It absolutely does. But if you want to grow in incremental ways, you've got to step out there. You've got to get out of that safe zone, and you do have to risk failure. But what I'll say is, most of the time, even things that may feel like failure can be fixed, can be adjusted, and you can grow into that situation for having taken that chance. I would say there's actually a bigger risk to not growing, because you might stay stagnant, you might get bored, and you might even become irrelevant. If you stay stuck when the market around you or your peers or your clients, whatever that situation is, know things that you don't know and grow past you, you may become irrelevant. And sometimes by the time you recognize that, I don't want to say it's too late, but it's harder to get caught up and get where you want to be. So focusing on that from the beginning is often a much more effective and efficient way to do it. So I'm going to say there's a bigger risk in not growing than there is in growing. So take it on. The key really is having a growth mindset. And by that, I mean believing that your talents and abilities can be developed. Nobody's born knowing everything that they need to know. We get it. We go out and get it. So if you have the mindset that your talents and abilities can be developed, there's almost no limit to what you can do. The opposite is a fixed mindset. And that kind of is a dangerous place to be, because if you're thinking that your skills and talents can't be developed, then there's no benefit to growing. You're not going to seek it out. And, it's hard for me to say that growth mindset is good and fixed mindset is bad, because each has its place. But the truth is, kind of my audience, the people that are attuned to my message, do have that growth mindset. So I definitely have a bias towards that. And the truth is that sometimes the hardest things are the ones that we grow the most from. It's painful, but it's true. And so we might as well embrace it. We might as well take it on, and then mine every bit of learning that we can from it, rest, and go again when you're ready, because growth can happen. It usually doesn't happen on a steady path. It often has, plateaus, and then you go again. So, it can be hard, it can be painful, but you can learn so much from it if you have that right mindset. So how do you know when you're growing enough or when you're stretching enough? There's kind of a bandwidth around growth in terms of staying stagnant or really stretching yourself too far, because, sometimes you can take on too much and you can maybe you're not set up for success. So what's the right zone? What's the optimal place for you? And so that's an important thing to take a look at. And then it's important to think about, does your current job or your current situation offer the opportunities that you want for your skill development, personal, professional growth? Like, are you in a situation that matches where you want to be on that spectrum? And that's really important for you to think about, because then you know whether to push yourself or whether it's time to take a step back and, be on one of those plateaus and wait for the time to grow again. This is definitely not a think it and it will come situation. You really do have to get into action. So what's the action here? It's really about thinking about it, doing that work to figure out where you want to be and where you may need to grow so that you can really do it on purpose. And sometimes something that's really valuable to help you figure that out is getting out of your own head and talking to other people about it. So, hopefully you have friends or colleagues, maybe a partner, mentor, whoever that is, that you can talk to these things about. Getting out of your own head and sharing these ideas can really unleash some magic in terms of figuring out what it is you need. I'm always so impressed and really honored that my clients choose me sometimes to be that thought partner. And it's just so gratifying to see where people can take it just by verbalizing it and sharing those thoughts with others. Because a lot of times we just don't talk about it. So get out of your own head. Get somebody else to talk to about it, whoever that is for you, so that you can figure out where you need to grow and how you can do it. And that's where figuring out the goal is so important. Thinking about where it is you want to be. Does the goal that you set out initially still fit you? And doing some self-reflection on that can be so helpful, because then you can measure it against where you are and figure out how you can close those gaps. The goals that we set early on in our careers don't always still fit. And so taking that look is worth it, so you can figure out where those gaps are and really focus your growth in the right direction. So those are my thoughts on growth for this week. I hope it's been helpful for you to spend some time with growth and think about it. We'll be talking about it more during the month. But our pillar that we'll go into and talk about next week is balance, which is one of my particular favorites, because I think it's kind of underappreciated how important it is. So I'll look forward to talking to you about that next week. So thanks for coming. Thanks for listening, and have a great week. Thanks so much for listening to Fulfilling Career, Happy Life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, follow, rate, and review. Do all the things to show your support for this podcast. It helps other professionals who want to feel more energized about their work again find us. And if you want to take this thinking further, please follow me on LinkedIn, where I share content on a regular basis. You can also get on my email list by downloading the Career Satisfaction Assessment or through my website. All these links are in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. I truly appreciate that you make the time for yourself to listen to the show. See you next week.